Tie another wet fly today from Ray Bergman's book Trout. This is called the Heckham Red. I don't know anything about the history on this fly. There's a number of different patterns that I've discovered that have the Heckham name in it, so I can only assume that the originator's last name was Heckham and that was part of the naming of the fly, but I don't know anything else about this particular pattern, why it was tied and where it originated. I liked it because it's a handsome little pattern that has a white floss tip to it. Tail and the wing are just mottled turkey, pretty basic and simple, floss body, rib, and a collared hackle. So that's the Heckham's Red. I'll go ahead and get started tying. So I'll start the Heckham Red with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad 3399 in a size 6. It's a standard wet fly hook. I'll debarb the hook. I'm going to attach my thread. I'm going to start with a Danville 6/0 in white. Because this has a white tip on it, I want to make certain that I don't darken that up. I've already waxed my thread. I'm going to start about an eye length behind the eye of the hook, just putting down a base layer of thread. I'm going to advance to the end of the shank. Now here I'm going to tie in the tip. On the Heckham Red, the tip is a white floss. I'm using a Danville 4-strand Rayon in white. I'm going to use all 4 strands on this size hook. Actually, I'm only going to use 3 strands for the actual tip. 1 is for security. I'm going to tie that in and I'm advance my thread down the hook shank to the end of the tip. The reason I'm doing that is that I want to put a layer of thread down underneath the tip and then back up. It's going to help darken, it's going to help lighten up that hook, that bronze under there, so it doesn't darken up the eventual tip. I'm going to turn my hook over. I'm going to take 3 of these strands and I try to isolate one that is towards the back, like this one here. And I'm only going to use 3 for the actual tip and 1 is used for security. If you've never tied in a tip using floss before, it's a good idea to leave the 1 out, and we're going to use that for security. The reason being that this floss, when you're fishing the fly, even when you're just handling it, because it is partly down the bend of the hook, if you touch this floss or anything bumps up against the floss here, it'll actually start to advance down the bend of the hook. So pretty soon, it's not a nice tip anymore. We leave the 1 strand out so that we can fold it over the very top, tie that in, and that just adds security so that that floss will not start to slide down the bend of the hook. I'm going to clip this a little bit longer. Notice that the butt ends of that floss I left about halfway down the hook shank, not the full length of the body. This one I'm going to clip just a little bit further. This is going to help me to keep that body from getting a little bit too thick. You could certainly have all of it out here to the end of the body if you want. I'm going to advance my thread forward. This is just collecting all of that floss down. I just find it's easier to do this now than when I'm wrapping in the actual floss body. I'll bring my thread back down almost to the tip. Here I'm going to tie in the tail. The tail for the Heckham Red is just some mottled turkey, and so is the wing. I've got a left and a right. I like the tails on these to be a little thinner, meaning in this case from top to bottom it's just not that wide. I'm going to tie that in about a shank length to maybe a hook length long. It's up to you. A little bit longer if you like, or a little shorter. Secure that down with a few wraps, working my way down to that tip a little bit. I'm going to trim this the length of the body. For a rib, I'm using a size 14 Danville Mylar silver and gold tinsel. I'm going to use this as a gold rib, so I'm going to tie this in with the silver side out. And then I'm going to attach the body material, which is I'm using a Danville's 4-strand rayon in red. I think the original body in the recipe calls it scarlet, and I don't know if this red is to kind of match up with the original scarlet floss, but this is the red that I have. Now I'm going to wrap a couple of times in to secure all of that, and notice I'm wrapping back towards the tip. This makes certain that I have everything tied in, so when I start to wrap it, it will cover up any thread wraps and be right up against that tip. At this point, I'm going to put some wax on my thread. And I'm going to advance my thread forward. Touching turns gives me a nice even underbody. Then I shall apply the red floss for the body and the rib. Wanted to, you could use a narrower rib, Mylar tinsel rib on this if you wanted that to be a little narrower than that. So go with a size 16 if you want to. A little bit more of that red floss out there. And I'll change over to my finishing thread. This is a Danville 6/0 in black. A little wax on my thread. Next, I shall tie in the wing. As I mentioned, the Heckham Red uses a mottled turkey for the wing. I've got my left and right cut out and matched up here. I'm going to set that up here so that the tip is about halfway down the tail. I'm going to help this out a little bit in terms of how I tie this in. Rather than just pulling the thread down now and trying to cinch that down, I'm going to brace the back part of the wing with both my fingers here, and the front part, I'm going to actually push this down towards the hook so that that thread kind of pulls it down and it ends up sweeping down the front a little bit more here, keeping the rest of that wing right up on the back, as opposed to taking all of it and just pulling all of it down in the middle. That one didn't go in all that great, so I'm going to unwrap it and I'll try that again. Secure that in, and then we can see how our wing looks. Trim away the excess. Secure that down and cover up all those butt ends to give myself a nice smooth platform. I often find that turkey, for me, tends to push more up at an upward angle. Sometimes you can massage that a little bit to get that a little more horizontal. So the hackle on this, it calls for a reddish brown, and I've got a nice little kind of reddish brown hen neck. These are nice long feathers. One of the reasons I like this particular neck. I want the hackles on these to extend from just in the head area here to just past the hook point into the bend here. I'm going to secure this in, a couple of wraps, folding that tip back and securing that in. And advance my thread down to the eye of the hook. I can take that tip, pop that off, grabbing my hackle pliers. I can then wrap the collar in. I'm going to get about 3 wraps here. I don't want this to be super bushy or thick. This is just to represent legs on our little drowned insect here. So I'll get 3 wraps as I come up around for that 4th one. I'll secure that in. Folding all of the hackle fibers back, I'll start wrapping from behind the eye of the hook rearward, securing all of that in and making the head of the fly. Get about half of the head done, I'm going to stop. I can just pop that tip, it's not tip, but the rest of that feather off right there, and now I can advance rearward a little bit more, finishing up the head of the fly. Just take your time with this. Go back down to the eye a little bit, come back up to smooth that off. You don't want to make it too big. Then I'm going to flatten my thread, and I'll use the whip finish here with the flattened thread to finish off the head. drop of head cement on both sides of the head. That'll soak down in there, securing all that thread together. I'll come back in a moment and put on a couple layers of black lacquer to finish up the Heckham Red. Handsome little fly. I enjoy tying some of these that have the floss tip in them. It has nice colors to it. Interesting little pattern. Again, I don't know anything about the history on this. There wasn't anything in Ray Bergman's book Trout other than it was mentioned in there, at least that I could find. If anybody does know anything about the history of the Heckham Red, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.